All right, in this video, I'm going to be doing examples that are very, very similar to the ones in your test. So if, for example, you missed question number 5 on your test, you can fast forward in this video and look at example number 5 here, and it'll be very similar to the one in your test, so that way, hopefully, you can see how to solve the problems in your test. So I'm going to start with number 1. I'm just going to go in order. So number 1 is very similar to the one in your test. I have to factor this trinomial. And so I know that my 3 values that I have up here are A, B, and C. And so remember, if you don't see a number with the x squared, that means there's a 1. Okay, so remember, to create my x puzzle, I always multiply A and C and put that on top. And on the bottom, I put the B value. So 1 times negative 24 is negative 24. B goes on the bottom, so that 2 goes on the bottom. And then I find factors of 24. So what I saw on some of your tests is that some students were having a hard time finding factors, and I showed you how to do that in this one. So you can do 24 divided by x, settings, table, and then it only gives you up to 2. So you're gonna type in 3, and then just hit enter a couple of times so that it gives you a bunch of numbers. And remember that factors are my numbers that are whole numbers. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, not 5 because it has a decimal. And then 6 times 4 is already up here. So these are all my factors for 24. So I'm going to write them down on my screen. 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. Okay, so I also had this on the board during your test, and this helps you determine your signs if you have a hard time with that. So just make sure that when you're using these keys right here, you have your factors listed with the greatest numbers on the right side. So now I'm looking for something that subtracts, because it's negative, subtracts to give me positive 2. So if I'm looking at my key, I have negative on top, positive on the bottom. So negative on top, positive on the bottom. Something that subtracts to give me 2 is 4 and 6. And right here, my key shows me the negative goes on the left, the positive goes on the right. So this should be a negative. This should be a positive. And remember, because my A is 1, my answer is going to come straight from here. X minus 4 and X plus 6. So number 1 in your test is very similar to this one. Just make sure you're using decimals to find your factors, and you use your key so that you get the right signs in the right numbers. So if you miss number 1, you can correct number 1. Right. Number 2, very similar to number 1. I have A, B, and C. Remember, you always want to check to make sure your numbers are not perfect squares, because if they are, there's a shortcut. So A is not a perfect square. C is, but not A, so I have to do the X. And remember, just like we did in the previous example, we put 8 times C in the top. So 5 times 9 is 45. B goes on the bottom, so negative 18. Okay, I'm looking for factors of 45. So 1 times 45. 9 times 5. There's more things, so let's look them up. So 45 divided by X. 1 times 45, 3 times 15, 5 times 9, I missed 3 times 15. All right, so those are all my factors. I have my numbers, my greatest numbers listed on the right side, so I can use my key to help me out. So on the top, I have a positive 45. On the bottom, I have a negative 18. So positive on top, negative on the bottom. This means my 2 numbers have to be negatives, and I'm looking for them to add up to 18. So right here, 15 plus 3 is going to give me 18. My key says both of them are negatives. That way they're going to add up to negative 18. Okay, so these are the numbers that I'm using. And because it is not with an A value of 1, that means I'm going to have to do the long way. So I copy the first term, 5x squared. I replace this with these numbers, minus 3x minus 15x. And I copy this last one plus 9. Split it down the middle. That way I have 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And I find the greatest common factor between 5 and 3. So I also showed you how to do this on Desmos. So just in case you forgot, I want to remind you that you do GCD, and then my numbers were 5 and 3. So 5 comma 3, and it tells me it's 1. So right here, I'm dividing both numbers by 1x, and I'm dividing. 5 divided by 1 is 5. Negative 3 divided by 1 is negative 3. Okay, so now on the left side, right side, I'm sorry, I'm going to find the greatest common factor between 15 and 9. And so again, you can use Desmos. So I want to show you GCD of 15 comma 9 tells me it's 3. So here I'm dividing those two numbers by 3. I'm not dividing by x this time because only the 15 has the x, not the 9. But I do have to divide by negative 3 because my first number here was a negative. So it doesn't matter if your second number is a negative, but whenever it's the first one is a negative, you have to divide with the negative also. So I'm dividing by negative 3. Negative 15 divided by negative 3 is positive 5x. And then 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. And so now I have this factor and this factor are the exact same thing, but you only write it once. My second factor that I'm going to write is this 1x and this negative 3. So I have 1x minus 3. And so this is my answer. And so you can do number 2 just like this one, or remember that also you can multiply your answer choices like that and see which one gives you the same problem. So number 2 in your test is just like this one. You can follow the steps on this one to work out number 2 if you got it wrong. Okay, number 3. Number 3 says write the expression that's equivalent to this. So there's there's 2 problems very similar to this one on your test. And a lot of students forgot that this is A and this is B. There's no C. That's why I could not do the X because there's no C. So since I only have A and B, what I have to do is I have to find the greatest common factor so I can divide it on both of those numbers. So here you would have to do GCD for 12 and 8. So here, GCD, 12 comma 8 tells me it's 4. So that means I have to divide both numbers by 4. Also, they each have an X. So I'm going to take out that X and I'm going to be dividing right here. So this number that I put down right here has to be the first thing in my answer. And then I can start dividing so I can put that inside the parentheses. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then 8 divided by 4 is positive 2. So this is my answer. So all you have to do here, find the greatest common factor in decimals, and then divide it for each of your numbers. All right, number 4. Again, factoring. I do have A, B, and C. So you could multiply A times C to create your X. I had some students do that and it took them a long time to find all the factors because you can see that they're really big numbers. So what I wanted you guys to realize during your test is that these numbers here were perfect squares. So here's my list of perfect squares. 36 is right here in my list. And the C is also in my list. And so remember, if A and C are perfect squares, all I have to do is take the square root of those two numbers. So the square root of 36, if you don't know it, you can always type it in decimal. Square root of 36 gives me positive 6. So that gave me 6. Square root of x squared is just x. I'll bring down this middle sign right here. And then the square root of 25 is 5. So this is my answer. Both of them are the exact same thing. Middle term tells me that they're both negative. And so now just to find your answer, you have to remember that this is the same thing as this. It is the same factor. Sorry, not this one. It's B. The same factor twice. They both have minus, and then it's the same factor 2 times. So it's B. So in your test, there's one very, very similar to this one, number 4. So you're just doing the square root because they're perfect. Right, number 5 is similar to number 3 that we did earlier. So for this one, this is A, this is B, there's no C, so I cannot do the X. So I have to find the greatest common factor, the GCD, for those two numbers. Greatest common factor for 14 and 70. If you type this in decimals, it tells you that it's 14. So I'm dividing both of those numbers by 14. You also have to notice there's X on both of them, so you have to divide the X. And then there's one more thing you have to notice. Just like on your test, the first number here is negative, and so that means you're gonna divide by a negative. So a lot of students forgot that negative on their tests. So we're dividing. This negative 14x that I wrote down is the first thing that should be on my answer. Greatest common factor between 14 and 70 is not 14, I'm sorry, it's 7. So right here, 7. So negative 7x. And so I can see, it can cancel C already. I have two options with negative 7x on the outside. And then I'm just dividing. 14 divided by 7 is 2. 70 divided by negative 70 is negative 10. So my answer is B. So just on your test, make sure if you're correcting number 5, make sure you are typing your negative so that you're getting the right signs for your answer. Right, number 6. Okay, very similar to the one on your test because I have an A value that's 1 and I have both my C and my B values as negative numbers. There's 1 here also. So my A is perfect, but not my C. That means I have to do the X. 1 times negative 56 is negative 56. B goes on the bottom, so that's negative 1. So I'm finding the factors of 56. So again, we can do that in decimals. So you would do 56 divided by X. You go to the settings, you click on the table, and you just enter more numbers so you can find all your factors. And so 1 times 56, 2 times 28, 4 times 14. Uh, 7 and 8, and that's it, 7 and 8. So again, notice I listed the greater numbers on the right side so that I can use this key. I have negative on top and negative on the bottom. So right here, negative on top, negative on the bottom. That means my number on the left side is going to be positive. My number on the right side is going to be negative. First, I have to find which one has a difference because it's a negative difference of 1. Pretty obvious here is the 8 and the 7. And then the negative has to be on the 8. Positive on the 7. That way, when I add them, it's a negative 1. Okay, so same as problem number 1, where I had A as 1. My factors come straight from my X plus 1. So it is X plus 7 and X minus 8. Only because A is 1. If A were not 1, you had to do all the long process. Right, number 7. Okay, I'm having to factor. This is 1, 6, and 2. So A and C are not perfect. I have to do the X. 1 times 2 is 2. B goes on the bottom, so that's 6. I'm finding factors of 2. 1 times 2. That's it. There's no other factors. There is no way I can make the 2 and the 1 add up to 6. So because there's no factors that work out, my answer is none of these. So I know in your test, the numbers are a little bit harder to see, but if you actually work out the answers, if you multiply the answers, none of them will give you the same things up here. So for your work on that one, as long as you show me the factors and then select none of these, then that would be enough work for your credit. Okay, so this example that I'm doing next is similar to both numbers 8 and 9 on your test. So if you missed any of those two problems, it's going to be the same as this example that I'm going to do. So on this one, I have to factor this problem right here. And if you notice, this is my A value because it has X squared. This is not my B value. This is my C value because it doesn't have a letter. It doesn't have X. So I can check A and C. I can check if they're in my list of perfect squares. 4 is in my list. 36 is also. So this becomes a really easy problem if you remember that all you had to do was take the square root. So the square root of 4, again, remember you can type this in decimals. You just do square root of 4 gives you 2. And then since it's x squared here, I'm going to keep 1x. Bring down that minus sign. And then the square root of 36, if you don't know, you can type it in decimals. It's 6. So this is one factor. And what you had to remember for your test is that you have two factors. The other one is the same numbers, but instead of a minus, there's a plus. So there's an example we did earlier where you had a trinomial. Both of the signs were the same. Here, because we only have two numbers, there's no b. One is minus and the other one's plus. So this is one of my factors. Okay, so numbers 8 and 9 in your test are very similar to this one. They're perfect squares, so you can just apply the square root to A and C. Okay, number 10. A, B, and C. A is perfect, but C is not, so I have to do the X. 1 times 14, it's 14. B goes on the bottom. And I'm looking for factors of 14. 1 times 14, 2 times 7. I'm looking for two numbers that add up to give me 9. I put a B here, I meant to put a 9. Okay, so two numbers that add up to give me 9. 2 plus 7 is going to give me 9. They're both positive numbers, so both of those have to be positive. Again, A is 1, so there's a shortcut here. All I gotta do is take my numbers from here. X plus 2 is one factor. X plus 7 is another factor. So very similar to number 10 in your test, so you can correct that one if you missed it. Okay, number 11, same thing, A, B, and C. A and C are not perfect, half to the X. 2 times 5 is 10. B goes on the bottom, that's 11. And then find factors of 10. 1 times 10, 2 times 5. I'm looking for the pair that adds to give me 11, so that's this pair. They're both positives because all my numbers are positives. So this one, A is not 1, so I cannot do the shortcut that I did in the other problem. For this one, I have to do everything. So I copy this one. I don't want that one. I'm going to copy this plus 1x and this plus 10x. Then I copy this last one plus 5. You split it down the middle, and I find the greatest common factor for each side. So greatest common factor, you could do this in decimals, GCD for 2 and 1 is 1. Remember, on this left side, we always take out the x. So now divide. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 1 divided by 1 is 1. Okay, same thing on this side. Greatest common factor for 10 and 5 is 5. Bring down the 5 only, and then divide. 10 divided by 5 is 2x. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So same factor, 2x plus 1. And then 1x plus 5. So this is my answer, which was x plus 5, 2x plus 1, this one. Remember that 1, you don't see it. It's this one. All right, last one. This looks like the one in your test also. So I'm going to solve this one. If you notice, this top trinomial, it's the same that I just did, I think, right now. 2, 11, 5. 2, 11, 5. So I factor all this so you can rewind if you didn't see this example. Factor all this and I got 2x plus 1 and x plus 5. Okay, so this is what I got from the previous example because it's the same one. On the bottom, I have x plus 5. So all you have to remember on this one is that when you have factor on top and on the bottom, they cancel each other out. So the x plus 5 cancels. And my only answer is the 2x plus 1. So if you miss number 12 on your test, you can watch example 11 and 12, and then you can see how to solve the one on your test.